Someone's picking off costumed heroes.
All right, folks, welcome to Cartoon Insider, where cartoonists talk about animation, comics, and all things related to the industry that we love. If you dig what we're doing, hit the like button and subscribe. Today, I am very happy to be welcoming to our program producer-director Brandon Vietti and also art director John Hoekstra. And we're here to talk about the animated movie version of the classic graphic novel Watchmen by Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore. Welcome to the show.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
All right. This is the Cartoon Insider. I did have some involvement with this project, but not on chapter one. Brandon brought me on to co-direct with him on chapter two, and maybe we'll revisit that at a later date. But today it's all about chapter one, which is debuting. It's airing. It's out there, and it's getting some good reviews. So, Brandon, I'd like to start with you. So, how did this all begin? What was the process for getting this thing off the ground in the first place, and what was your involvement there?
Well, actually, my bosses at Warner Brothers Animation, Sam Register and Peter Girardi, had come to me and talked about the idea of adapting Watchmen. And I think what appealed to them most was making an actual experience that feels like the book, but translated to animation. And that idea really appealed to me. I love a challenge, and Watchmen certainly is the king of all challenges, and trying to make it, adapted to any other media. It's just so perfectly made for a comic. It's intimidating to see what Gibbons and Moore did, and Higgins. It's a stunning piece of work that I know you and I have talked about, and uh, it's one of those things where you can keep going back into it multiple times and rereading it front to back, and you're always going to find something new. So plus the prestige of it. I mean, it's a legendary book. So again, going back to that, initial discussion with my bosses of like, hey, let's adapt Watchmen. It was gulp, you know, it's
Yeah.
it's a pretty steep request, but also a challenge I really love. I love all the layers, and I love the idea of trying to figure out, well, how can we, take this great material that is so perfect for a book format and then translate it to animation specifically. What could we possibly do with the animation medium that a comic book can't, that might, be a way in for other people that haven't read the book, a new generation that isn't familiar with the book, or the great 2009 movie. There's always going to be a new audience uh, for this stuff. You and I know that we've done so much DC stuff together over the years, and quite often, it's a generational thing. You're always making somebody's first experience with a DC character. So again, all of that I think made made the idea of jumping into this project really appealing, and uh, and so we set to work.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Watchmen, for me, I'm a child of the 80s, and it was literally life-changing. Like every month the new issue came, I went to the comic store looking forward to that more than anything else. I think my interest in comic books were waning because I was transitioning from a child, well, at least to a teenager, on my way to adulthood. So this came along and it was not like anything I'd ever seen before. So yeah, it's always been a favorite of mine. But yeah, with that comes a lot of gravitas when it comes to being involved with an adaptation of it creatively. And certainly, yeah, you've talked about how you felt that and dealt with it. And when I was asked to come on for part two, I immediately said yes because we have a long history together, and I've always enjoyed working with you on our other projects, Young Justice, the Batman. So I just said yes without even thinking about it. And then, no, knowing nothing, I'd seen nothing. You showed me nothing. You were just like, "Hey, I was just thinking about, did you want to maybe be involved?" I was like, "Yes, yes, of course I do." And then I was like, "Holy crap! I can't believe this is what's happening. This is what we're doing here." But yeah, I wasn't disappointed. I knew. I mean, you're always someone who has taken anything that you've been involved with at Warner Brothers very seriously as an artist, whether it's the Batman, whether it's Young Justice, or any of the other projects, the DTVs that you've been involved with. Very meticulous, attention to detail, always putting in that extra effort to make it the best result possible. So I knew it was in good hands. And then when you showed me all that development work you had done uh, for Watchmen, some of that was, I think, for the pitch. Some of it was just development work going into production to be able to give to people like John and other people that were involved to give them direction creatively. All my fears were, you know, were set aside, and I knew it was in good hands, and just very happy to be involved with the project. Um, so yeah, it was great. You were definitely the guy for the job, and I was very happy to be part of it.
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, I'm a big fan of, intricate craftsmanship, and it's hard to top Watchmen for that.
Yeah,
Something I always tried to do with my career, but jumping into Watchmen was, no matter what I've done in the past, trying to get intricate craftsmanship across in the various projects we've worked on, jumping into Watchmen was like going back to school. I mean, it really was new levels of craftsmanship and the many layers of things going on in the background, not just written into the story, but literally drawn on the page. And then, the challenge of trying to get all of that on the screen and vocalized through the actors, and who did an amazing. We have a hell of a cast that stepped up to that challenge as
yeah.
well, and all of our crew,
Mhm.
under John, the storyboard artists. I think we all had discussions up front about the depth of craftsmanship and the layering that is so built into Watchmen and is the challenge of adapting Watchmen. And everybody stepped up to that challenge. So hopefully, people will see all of those layers and enjoy watching the movie multiple times, just as I know many people enjoy reading the book over and over.
Yeah, that care and craftsmanship is literally in every shot. Every shot is just thought about on every level, art direction, just creatively storytelling, even like what lens, to use for that shot. These are all things that were fantastic, but it was definitely on another level. Like this was not the Batman, this was not Young Justice, this was film. And that's that creatively it was wonderful to be
Yeah, I mean, that was exciting
doing
to me to get back into 3D. It had been a while since I'd worked on a CG show.
that.
And I mean, I love 2D, but there's just more you can say and do in a 3D space with
Right.
real lighting. And as you said, lens choice,
Hmm.
camera movement, all of those things can be used to convey story.
Hmm.
And those are great tools for us as filmmakers, again, to adapt a book that doesn't have those tools. And it gives us the ability to make some choices that Dave Gibbons wouldn't have been able to. And hopefully, employ those tools in a way that, again, help bring that story to life in a slightly different way. And hopefully in a way that, really comes to life specifically in an animated medium as opposed to live action.
Yeah, an animated medium that is essentially telling a story like live action though, because it is 3D, which
Yeah, yeah. And
great.
I mean, everybody's going to have a different opinion on this, but I mean, I think
Hmm.
there are some things I think you can do with filmmaking that I think kind of work out a little better in animation. I think there are some things that, animation can do that might be more fitting in animation than in live action. I mean, you do anything in live action with CG, but it's like now you're fusing animation with live action. I think again, what I loved about the challenge brought to me was trying to you know make something that feels like a comic book experience. So the whole process of animating Dave Gibbons' designs and art style to life, and then filming a movie around that style and in that the style of the world that Dave Gibbons designed. Again, it opened up opportunities for storytelling that I just don't think would be possible in live action. And again, hopefully fans of the 2009 movie will find interesting, things that we did differently, and fans of the book will also find interesting things that we did a little bit differently. I think that's the fun of adaptation.
Yeah.
Every artist is going to bring something different to the adaptation. Every medium is going to offer up opportunities to explore a well-known story in a different way. And so I'm hoping that our movie rises to the challenge for all of the audiences out there.
Yeah. So John, at what point did you become attached to the project with Brandon?
So my wife was hired first to do some of the very first look pieces, and she was still working on What If, but we had freelance time, so I was helping her like build all the sets, and then we would paint on top of that. And then I got hired as a 3D previs artist on the project, and then from there I got art director after that. So it
Oh, I
was like,
see. Just so we get that for the audience, what is your wife's name?
oh, Christina Vardazarian.
Okay, and she's working on What If as
So she was the art director of What If.
Oh, okay.
I think
Awesome.
for 3 seasons or 2 seasons, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And then now she's at Netflix. But yeah.
Okay. All right, so you started off just doing a few things for the Watchmen project, and that just kind of evolved into being a full-on art director for it.
Yeah, basically. I was basically first started as 3D viz dev slash layout.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was no art director. It seemed like they were searching for one and couldn't find one. And I kind of like, I feel like I nailed the style in a way,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the rendering and how I wanted to handle the line art and some of the shadows and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Cindy and Brandon gave me the opportunity to take over and try and bring Gibbons' vision alive, basically.
Yeah, I know that part was very important for Brandon to translate. How do you translate the 2D art of Gibbons into a 3D film? And that I think is one of the strengths of the film. It's not 2D animation, it's not live action, but it is Gibbons' artwork come to life in many ways. It has the same look and aesthetic, and the same kind of line work. And you guys managed to achieve a pretty organic looking line too, that doesn't look mechanical. It has like a little grit to it.
We literally translated his line from the comic, the actual
Yeah.
micron dot specifically, into a brush tip.
Hmm.
And so the lines are quite literally his lines.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
you also went overseas as well to the studio to help guide them through the process. What was that like?
Uh, it was definitely interesting. I've never been to it felt like in a way the animation studio, which is Studio Mir, they kind of were figuring out along the way a little bit on certain things that they have never done before.
Yeah.
I came on to try and like sure up their pipeline and make sure that they understood what we were looking for and the quality of animation that we were looking for. So it was a lot of teaching and a lot of training.
Great. I interrupted you, Brandon. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just going to add to the discussion of those Gibbons lines, how important it was in, again, trying to craft an experience that feels like the book, to create an experience that feels like traditional media, to try to, through the filmmaking and through the design and through the lighting even, try to capture that non-Photoshop experience that could only come from the 80s. There
Yeah.
was no Photoshop, so we wanted to make sure that any line work felt like an ink line drawn on Bristol board, which is how the comic book pages would have been drawn on, you know, Bristol board, being printed on pulpy paper from the 80s would have given you sort of a pulpy texture, paper texture underneath the inks and the colors. And so even the airbrush covers, I mean, we looked at a lot of those, all of the covers for the first 12 issues have a lot of airbrush and traditional media. Again, no Photoshop, it just didn't exist. And, you know, we're obviously working in a CG medium, and that works against us in a way because there was no CG in the 80s, but we were doing everything that we could to counter the CG-ness, if you will, with as many traditional media textures as we possibly could, again, so that you feel like this is a thing that came to life in the 80s. We had explored the idea of doing 2D animation, but we had done some tests early on and talked to a number of studios early on about how we might approach getting all of those awesome Dave Gibbons render lines onto the characters in 2D animation. The 2D animation process is all about subtracting lines. It's about simplicity of line art.
Yeah.
And while there are some anime shows, I think, that do a lot of hatch work that feels like it comes from comics or manga, it does create a sort of jittery quality. It's really hard to track the lines as a character is turning. The lines really jitter and call a lot of attention to themselves. And it was something that after some tests and discussions with studios, it was like, this is just not gonna be as graceful as we want it to look. It's just not going to animate well.
Yeah.
And CG just kind of really took the lead in terms of like, it would be the smoothest transition of adapting all of those Dave Gibbons hatch lines to animation.
Yeah, I can't envision how else you would do it.
Yeah. I mean,
You
you
got
know, another thing too, since John brought up, you know, you and Christina both worked on What If. I know that's something I've seen in like comments and stuff that it looks like we like copied that show. And I got to point out, we did not. It was all for us. It was all about bringing Dave Gibbons art to life, and we did use a cell shaded and a CG look, which goes back decades and doesn't just start with What If. But I don't know, John, if you want to, since you guys worked on that, you guys can also talk about the differences too.
Yeah, I mean, the two shows don't look anything at all alike. Like, not even kind of. The only thing that they share is cell shading, and that's it. Like,
Yeah.
I've done both. I've done all the BG paints. There's nothing shared, literally nothing. And What If we have an abstract design where we have these broken shapes on any background? So if you zoom into any one spot in What If, it's supposed to be an abstract painting, and it doesn't have any textures. It's supposed to be kind of smooth. It's supposed to be more digital on purpose. Whereas Watchmen, I scanned in actual bristle board so that when we made our spray brush, it was truly like traditional material. Everything was traditional. There was no artificial brushes essentially. They all had textures, or the tooth or the brush tip shape was always something like I scanned in an actual, like taking a brush and hitting it on Bristol, and then we scan that in and use that. Or the micron pen dots were like really, really thick micron that we hit onto Bristol to copy some of them for the really big ones so that the texture held up. So they really don't share anything in their style. And even still, like What If uses a lot of anime effects for like all the explosions and stuff. It's all like anime essentially, like stylistically. Watchmen, we didn't do that either. So everything that can be different is different. There's, other than they share cell shading, but even still, like the way that we handle lighting, we were trying to go for more realistic lighting or lighting from on set. And what if doesn't do that? It's trying to do like comic book rim light, everything's outlined. It's not at all the same, like even thought of lighting is
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
cinematography is different. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a compliment, honestly. If people think it kind of looks like that, it's like that's a beautiful show.
It
Okay,
is.
if we're
It is, but
hitting
it's
that,
different.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
great if we're like, you know, hitting that high mark of beauty. There's a lot of amazing artists that work on that show, but I felt lucky to have access to a couple that, you know, also knew it well enough to help us kind of avoid it so that it wouldn't just feel like a clone. You know, that's no fun. You don't want all your shows to look exactly the same. So
Right.
so you know, we really tried to make our own look and again really honor the book and create an experience that feels like you're viewing a comic book, living a comic book.
Um,
It's interesting how clever the audience is sometimes, where they were able to like literally pull on that thread and just be like, oh, somehow these two are related. And they did the same thing with Brandon's previous films. They were saying like, oh, Red Hood versus or yeah, Under the Red Hood, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. And then they were saying I forgot the other one that you did, Death in the Family, and then like Watchmen. It's like, how did you possibly figure that out? I don't know how you guys are able to do that. That's amazing.
yeah, we're paying attention.
Yeah.
Uh, so Brandon, as a producer, um, what was your involvement? You mentioned, this is set in the 80s. It was published in the 80s, and you wanted to capture that feel of the 80s. So, as far as the other aspects of the film, like music, how did that go into informing your musical choices?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I didn't want to do a sort of what you might call a traditional symphonic superhero score that might have been an, you know, like a John Williams score or something from
Mm,
Superman movie from the time or
hmm.
something like that. Watchmen was so subversive to traditional superhero stuff at the time that I thought maybe if we kind of lean toward a more synthy approach,
Hmm.
certainly respectful of the time period. There were a lot of synth scores emerging in the 80s and in
Yeah.
various films, and it felt like the right way to go to sort of explore the gritty noir world of Watchmen.
Hmm. Were there any particular artists from that time period that come to mind?
No, I mean there were a bunch. I didn't have any specifics, but Tim Kelly was our composer, and I've worked with Tim on a number of projects before, and he and I had both kind of bonded over our love for synth music. And
Mhm.
I'd been to his house and seen like all his keyboards, and he
Mhm.
had quite the synth setup already, and he is just very steeped and studied in how to create that kind of music. And so, you know, we had done like Lego Justice League movies in the past, and you know, very comedy oriented stuff. And this was a chance for us to kind of go in a totally opposite, very serious neo noir, dark kind
Mhm.
of direction, and really try to channel the 80s vibe, and you know, bring to life the world of Watchmen in a way that, you know, really adheres again to the vibe that comes out of the book.
Yeah, the music was really great, man. It's music is so important, especially for a project like this, to kind of help establish the whole vibe and mood of of the scenes, and I think it did so extremely well. It was great choices.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as the cast, what was your involvement there?
Oh, you know, I get to sit in a room with my bosses and kind of, you know, throw names around, and that's the usual casting process, I think, on any project. But boy, did I feel lucky to get all the great people that we got. I mean, Titus Welliver as Rorschach is amazing. I mean, he's just got such a natural gravel to his voice, which is something that, you know, I think we all wanted to help kind of communicate that sort of off-putting, unsettling vibe that Rorschach needs to project. Anytime he's in a room, you
Yeah.
should always feel unsettled, like you're not sure if you should be ready to run to the door, or you know, you just don't know. There's that instability that simmers underneath the performance, and Titus was really able to nail that.
Yeah, he's got a very deep voice. He didn't have, it didn't seem like he had to do much to get it to that place. Like
No,
people were talking about the affectations of Rorschach in particular, but yeah, I don't, it didn't take that much for him to get there.
no, and he's really into this stuff too. Like
Yeah.
he didn't need an introduction to Watchmen. He knows this stuff inside and out, so he knew exactly what to do with the character.
Yeah. And Katie Sackhoff, that's a great one.
Yeah, um, I was really excited to
Mhm.
get to work with her, but with the character of Lori specifically, who was always,
Mhm.
I thought, such an important character in the book. And there's so much nuance and so many layers. She has such
Mhm.
an emotional roller coaster arc through the book that you see with her, so many ups and downs. And I hope for Katie, that was a lot of great stuff to work with. And I think just fun to bring to life on screen again in a way that is sometimes hard to pull out of a book experience. A book
Yeah.
really invites you in, and you sort of craft a performance in your mind, you know, and with such a multi-layered and multi-textured, you know, character like Lori, again, with so many ups and downs, it's
Mhm.
hard to get all of that across on the page
Mhm.
with the limited panel count.
Yeah.
But we've got so many more cuts, so many more shots of Lori's face, and you
Mhm.
get to see through her both animation performance, but also through Katie's vocal performance. You know, a lot more layers are coming through
Mhm.
uh, than you can get in a panel. So that was really exciting, I think, for all of us, for the board team, for the animators, I think
Yeah.
really got into Laurie's performance.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that was great. I wish we could have worked together more closely. You know, we were still kind of coming out of pandemic times when we recorded this, so
Mhm.
unfortunately, most of our sessions were through Zoom screens like we're doing now. So I never really got to meet Katie. Katie never got to meet Matthew Reese, who plays Dan Dryberg, and they had
Mhm.
so many scenes together, intimate scenes together.
Yeah.
But you just wouldn't know that they weren't in the same room. I think when you watch their performances or hear their performances on screen.
That's a great credit to their acting ability. But yeah, I miss those days, I gotta say. You know, when
Yeah,
we all went into the sound studio and I gotta meet some of these people. But yeah, I was, you know, in the second movie, I was watching some of the recordings, but pretty much just the fly on the wall. You were doing the, you know, we got a voice director, of course, and then you were adding your notes, and I just observed. But
Jamie Thomason, yeah, our
uh,
voice director,
yeah,
who's phenomenal
mm,
at dialing in realistic performances. And he, you know, really also got into the material and understanding the dramatic needs of the story, and that, you know, we really tried to push with Watchmen into areas that you don't often see in animation. I think animation can, you know, very easily lean into certain animation isms and acting and performance that you
mm,
wouldn't find in live action. But we were really trying to, you know, get live action performances from our actors, but also through our animation as best we could in the time that we had. And so that was a big challenge, I think, for all of us again in making the film. You know, trying to kind of move the needle a little bit on the sense of realism. That's what always hit me about Alan Moore's writing and Dave Gibbons' art and Higgins' colors is, I got a sense of realism from that book that I didn't get from other books.
Yeah.
And, we were really trying to get all of that through our movie as well, and move the needle on realism from what you might see in other animated movies.
Mhm. Yeah, a lot of close-ups. You weren't afraid to get that camera right in on their faces, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
that puts a lot of pressure on the animators too. But I think
yeah,
that was a different kind of movie for Studio Mir. But I think they really rose to the challenge and made something I don't think they've ever made before in terms of realism. I was so pleased with what they delivered for us.
that's great. Did you have a fine-tuning process in post? I know that's something in more recent years, I think that you've done more of, where you make small adjustment notes on just little emotional bits here and there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the post process helps us out quite a bit. From there's color correction, sound design, score, all of that is editing. I mean, there's smaller edits that we can make. You have a lot more creative room in editing when you're working with a 2D movie because it's every frame is just an individual drawing, and you can kind of tweak the drawings or duplicate drawings and create longer holds and stuff that might be needed for a more dramatic performance. But those tricks are gone in CG. It's much more like live action. So whatever you animate is kind of what you get, and your tool set is a little more limited in terms of uh, tweaking performances in post. So we didn't do too much of that. We just weren't able to. So we worked really hard, with our animation timing and vocal performances to really get everything dialed in perfectly so that we wouldn't mess with that too much in post. We wanted to get
Mm-hmm.
truest performances we could.
Right. John, what was some of your what was it like kind of a typical week or a day-to-day process while you were in production working on Watchmen? What kind
Well,
of
it was interesting because it was during the pandemic and we are kind of a product of that. So a lot of it was chasing down artists through Zoom,
yeah.
and then assigning them. And a lot of times, I probably micromanage more than they would enjoy. But we had to get it just right. So a lot of times I would, kind of draw over all their stuff and in re-sculpts things for even Studio Mir, where I was going in and re 3D modeling whatever they had, just trying to get everything just right. But most of the time it was just notes and then meetings and notes and meetings and notes and like notes during meetings and fixes during that. So I was pretty much working as much as I possibly could.
How could it really be otherwise on something like The Watchmen? You
So
know?
yeah, I mean, Dave Gibbons did so much upfront work for us in terms of
Mhm.
design, but that
Mhm.
translation still took a lot of time in doing full turns and then adapting all of that line work to a CG model. There's, it doesn't go smoothly all the time, and tweaks and adjustments need to be made. Um, so even though so much work was done upfront by Dave, the art of adaptation is deep, and the the list of assets, as we call them, all of the
Yeah.
things that you have to make, the character count, the
Huh?
all the props, all the backgrounds and sets,
Huh?
and all of that has to be colored, painted. Oh my gosh, it's well, I'd say more than double what we would probably normally do for a movie.
Mhm.
um, and that becomes a real cost consideration. It becomes a real consideration for everybody's workload. We're trying to make sure that we're not overworking people. That's not a goal for
Right.
us, but we are trying to do as much of the book as we possibly can.
Mhm.
So it was a real juggling act for me, our board teams,
Yeah.
John and his team, Cindy Rago, our
Mhm.
producer who kind of watches over the schedule and the budget. We were constantly in discussion to
Mhm.
make sure we could get as much of the book created for CG as possible, but at the same time make it producible without killing everybody. It
Right.
was,
And within the budget that we're,
yeah,
to
yeah.
be clear, we were not working with a big film budget or yeah,
No, it's
this
not a
is a
feature budget.
yeah. So yeah, it was about I think yeah, everybody was putting in more than 100% just on their own, just wanting to make sure this is you know, make that we were making it as good as we could, you know, with what we were given. It was a fascinating process too to see Gibbons put so much thought just into that street block where most of that action takes place, you know, and the finale takes place in that block in New York City. It was fascinating to see you guys try to figure that out and make sets out of it. Um, you know, and you know, Adrian's retreat at Karnak that was full of interesting challenges and just you know, going in there and studying the comic and trying to figure out where everything was. You know, it
Well, there's a
was
lot of
it's
mapping,
amazing.
and a lot of times what was difficult was
Mhm.
we would like grab every single shot that of Lori that Gibbons drew, every single one. And that ended up being something like 3,000 different poses of her face.
Mm.
None of them were drawn exactly the same.
Mhm.
We had to figure out what was the middle for, or the essence of Lori out of these thousands upon thousands of drawings. And sometimes like her mole switch sides or
Mhm.
things like that that I didn't realize and have read that comic probably a few thousand times now.
Yeah.
I didn't notice until I grabbed every single shot and meticulously went
Yeah.
through them.
I had read
I
it
remember the
many
mole
times.
switching. Did you catch a mole switching? I never saw that.
That's amazing.
Where was that?
I don't remember the exact page, but I still have it if you want to see.
I know
Yeah.
there was one that was like a photo of
Mhm.
young Lori with Sally, and they were like on vacation. So it was in a photo. And it always struck me that, yeah, the mole was on the wrong side. But I kind of looked into it, and from the time period when that photo was taken, it appeared to be like kind of like a Polaroid, like a street photographer took their photo. And in that time period, which Dave Gibbons would know,
Oh my God.
some of the Polaroid, I don't know if they were Polaroid, but some of the cameras that were like instant didn't make the image from a negative, but from a positive. I hope I'm getting my terminology right. But basically, the picture that would come out would be a mirror image, like a flipped. So the mole would be on the wrong side.
Oh,
And when I did the research on that, I'm like, oh my God, like Gibbons even knows like, what the Polaroid camera was that took the picture of young Lori and Sally in that
Mhm.
one image. And he made sure the mole was on the wrong side on purpose so that it was the time correct camera. That's stunning.
That is stunning. It's stunning that you actually know all that, Brandon. It's a testament to the amount of detail that not only went into the graphic novel, but then on your part, our part as well, adopting this thing.
Like I said, it was like going back to school
Yeah,
while
I
making
did.
these.
And it is, yeah, I had read it many times going into this. I reread it once I was brought on as co-director. I had some time to reread it yet again. Um, and but then it was only actually working on it in detail where you would notice there were some we don't have to get into the exact there were some small inconsistencies here and there, but this is just one person doing all of this, and the fact that it is so worked out and consistent is nothing short of, you know, stunning, really.
I was trying to see if he was being so robotic with it. I was
Mhm.
like, please, maybe a little bit that, so that if I knew how many lines needed to go down the side of the cheek,
Mhm.
or if there was some system to it, and there kind of wasn't. But we tried to like figure out what he mostly intended. So some of that happened, and hopefully that was part of the art of translation of it all, but
Mhm.
tried our best to truly
Yeah.
match whatever he did.
I wish we
Yeah.
had more time with him. We didn't get to talk to him at all through production.
Mhm.
He we had some good discussions in the beginning, but once
Mhm.
we set to work, I mean, there really wasn't time. I mean, were on a rocket and we just had to go as fast as we could and just create.
Right.
But yeah, I know many times I think John and I and you, Vincent, I mean, we all had, I think, discussions about what was Gibbons doing here? What was he thinking here? Why this choice? Why that choice? And yeah, boy, I wish we could all get in a room together someday and catch up.
Yeah, I thought I knew Watchmen, but I didn't know Watchmen nearly as well as I did by the time I was finished with this project because yes, I spent, because I had that Karnak sequence I was working on, and I studied every panel in just minute detail, like what was in each display case, where did those stairs go up to, where did that corridor lead to? It was yeah, but it was fun. Yeah, it was great.
It's
Um,
fun making all those spaces too, because like once we had we kind of tried to make a map ish out of all of the panels to figure out each and every little spot, and then making sense of it. And it felt like he must have drawn out some kind of map at some point because
yeah.
all the rooms worked everywhere we went. Like it all worked.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like completely broken rooms where you're like, I don't know where this could possibly be.
Yeah. Yeah.
We,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's
I had
interesting.
like taken screen grabs of some of the panels,
Mhm.
like for instance, the 40th and 7th, the intersection of 40th and 7th in New York City,
Mhm.
where the newsstand is and the Gunga Diner. Um, we needed to build out that set, and I just took as many screenshots as I could possibly find from the neighborhood and even the surrounding neighborhood, and where's the Chrysler building and where might Hollis Mason's house be uh, compared to where 40th and 7th is. So I would like screen grab all that and just put all the screen grabs on one giant sheet and try to come up with a sense of where everything is at. And sometimes that was based on, for instance, at some point you see Knot Tops running from the newsstand in a specific direction to get to Hollis Mason's house. And so I tried to, capture that in the filmmaking, but then that was the guide for how we would build the New York City set so that it would make sense. It would follow the book, but make sense with what Dave Gibbons planned out. And it worked. Like he had these landmarks that helped us connect everything in a 3D space, but he
Right.
did it first. Like he thought it out. He
Hmm.
found the landmarks and he committed to those landmarks, and we were able to spot them and then copy them into three dimensions.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about reading and rereading is you would that was all worked out. You'd see the diner in the background in an issue before that if you're just casually reading, you barely even register, or a couple of characters, maybe a Knot Top walking through the background, and then another issue or two later, you're there at that diner, because he
Yeah.
did have it all visualized.
And then I think since we were talking about Karnak, I mean,
Hmm.
I know some fans with really sharp eyes are going to notice we had to make some changes.
Hmm.
The space worked for the needs of the book, but not for the needs of filmmaking. And the amount of screen time it takes to walk from one place to another. We needed the space to just be slightly different. So
Right.
that was a good example, I think, of one of the challenges of just doing an adaptation is,
Hmm.
um, you know, there's a lot of talking that happens in Karnak.
Hmm.
Um, the talking takes place over a certain amount of time. The amount of time it takes from walk to walk from one place to another
Hmm.
is a certain amount of time. And that certain amount of time between the walking and the talking, those things may not add up in a real space. And we had
Right.
to account for that.
Hmm.
So we had to make some adjustments to some sets,
Yeah.
do our best to honor what's in the book, make it feel like the book, but work for what was best for our filmmaking and screen time.
Yeah, I'd say that's a difference between the adaptation that we worked on compared to the Snyder movie was which there's a lot of to be said positive about that, but he did, I feel, made purposeful decisions to change things to make it more of his own particular vision, where I feel like we were trying to be as faithful as possible but make those changes only out of necessity. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. But and I think any artist that comes into this to do an adaptation is going to make different choices in different places, and that's
Yeah.
kind of, I think, the great thing about adaptation of great material like Watchmen
Mm-hmm.
is that you're going to bring different actors in and different artists, and everybody's going to have a slightly different take on what that source material is.
Right.
And it might bring something new, give you a different take on characters or a different appreciation for a scene that you may not have gotten from your first read of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the fun of adaptations from different artists
Mm-hmm.
is what they can bring to it that helps you find deeper meaning in
Yeah.
the original material.
Well, and it is a condensed version. It's not adopting scene by scene of all 12 issues. It's two movies, just bringing it down to a more condensed level. So you had to make choices of like what you're going to focus on and what you're going to bring out. And I thought you did, what you did with the relationship with Dan and Lori in particular was great. I loved how you brought out their relationship in a new and interesting way that we hadn't seen before.
Well, good. I'm glad. And I hope other people, feel that way too when they see it. Again, I feel like, a lot of the material, it's already there in the book, but I think it's how you read it. I think
Yeah.
the reader of the book is also bringing something different that might be different from what the writer intended or from what Dave intended. When you're reading, you're adding to the story by
Mhm.
doing the performances in your own mind. Maybe you're going to do a different performance than Katie Sackhoff and Matthew Rhys,
That's true.
or
Yeah.
a completely different read than what Alan
Mhm.
Moore had in mind, Dave Gibbons. Like
Mhm.
everybody brings something different to it, whether
Mhm.
you're a reader or an artist who's adapting.
Mhm.
Everybody's going to have a slightly different take on the material. And again, I think that's kind of the fun of the adaptation. So I think, yeah, since you brought up the relationship and that's such an important relationship, I really thought the relationship between Dan and Lori is kind of the beating heart of the entire Watchmen story.
Yep.
That had to be just right. Like you really have to fall in love with those characters. The book starts off, you're following Rorschach, but as soon as he's arrested, he's off the table, and the story momentum falls into the laps of
Mhm.
Dan and Lori. You
Right.
better like them.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure to make
Mhm.
sure that you've been getting into their stories, you understand who they are, you understand where they're going, and you're along for that ride as they pick up the story and carry it through to the end. So um, again, it's all there. It's like we didn't add anything. We just read what was in that book.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, Jay Straczynski, who did the script, Jim Cree, we all had great conversations about, adapting this story, and again with every artist that came along helping us adapt. We created what we created, and I hope people again will find something, maybe something different but likable. I hope it like, I don't know, it's like a fresh take or something, right? It's like,
Yeah.
because we're certainly not doing our take. We're trying to do
Mhm.
the book the way we see it, and maybe it's different than the way you saw it, but maybe that'll bring a new appreciation to the original material for
Yep.
you. Did I
Yeah.
articulate that right? That was a hard one to
I did.
articulate.
No, it is. But I think you did. I think you did well. And I think audiences are going to be um kind of surprised in some way and satisfied by some of the other character journeys in this as well, without giving anything away. I'll just say um, the way we portrayed Hollis in particular, I think people are going to really like. There were some, and that was some of that came from the Straczynski script, and then others, also came from choices that we made as the film was being made. Um, so I'm looking forward to people's reactions to that.
I hope. I mean, you know this, and John knows this. I mean, I think favorite pieces, the Dr. Manhattan stuff on Mars. To me, that was kind of
Oh yeah.
the biggest creative push.
Mm-hmm.
I think it builds on Alan Moore's writing. I think what I love about the book is it's a little bit nonlinear. I mean, from the first page, you're going back and forth between detectives at a crime scene and what the crime was that was being committed. And that sort of cutting back and forth between two things sort of escalates. You get another layer of complexity with the Black Freighter
Mm-hmm.
becoming like a narrative device that you're cutting in and out of. The alley fight that sort of cross cuts with Dr. Manhattan being ambushed on a stage. You're seeing
Mm-hmm.
Dan and Laura ambushed in an alley, those two scenes coming to a head. All of that intricate uh, layering in the story, I think, becomes training for the much more complex nonlinear storytelling once we get to Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't really in the book. I mean, that was a place where I think I took some creative liberty from
Yeah.
the book and from Straczynski's draft of the script. And this was where, I had a lot of discussions with you guys about, how can we lean into the strengths of animation and filmmaking here to sort of create for the audience a sense of what the experience is for John Osterman becoming Dr. Manhattan. And what is it like to experience all points in time simultaneously? Or what is it like to have that awakening after the accident that gives him his powers? What is it like the first time he starts to experience multiple points in time? What does that feel like? And to me, that was something where, filmmaking specifically and the animation medium in particular could really help create that sense on the screen. And hopefully that's what it does for people. But that scene to me was super exciting.
Yeah, you put a lot of care into that, and that was super challenging, and I thought you did an amazing job. That's one of my favorite parts, actually. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, it was fun because I love film and I borrow from all my favorite filmmakers. So, there's transitions in that sequence that, help you understand that Manhattan's in multiple places at the same time. There's editing tricks with our editor, Chris Mertens. We worked out the scene with the accident with John getting locked in the vault, the test chamber, where once that door closes, you hear a ticking clock. There's a timer counting down to when the chamber will activate and obliterate him. And that becomes sound design, where we made the creative choice to sort of escalate the sound, increase the sound of the ticking clock. And then Chris Mertens and I worked on editing so that you feel the time is so important to Manhattan. So you feel the clock ticking with every single cut that happens on every single second that the clock is ticking. So using editing and sound design and all of this to kind of again sell the experience of time and how important it is to a former watchmaker who now experiences all points in time at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fun stuff, man. I love that stuff. And again,
Yeah, me
I
too.
wouldn't come up with it by myself. I have so many filmmakers that I, borrow and steal from that did this stuff before me. So again, this was like going back to school and like learning all the cool tricks and it needed that. I mean, Watchmen needed us to bring all the tricks that we've learned from an entire career
Yeah.
to help tell the story as best we could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really great to be able to talk more about filmmakers and film and directors and have it be so applicable, not just a cartoon.
Right.
It was something more. All right. All right, guys. Well, it's been great talking to you about this. I'm really looking forward to seeing how people respond to this. Really looking forward to chapter 2 coming out. There's no particular date for that. It's just later this year.
I haven't heard a date yet.
Mm-hmm.
Either.
Yeah. And before we sign off, is there anything else you guys are working on? What's in your future? What's next? for John Hoekstra?
Oh, I'm art directing a new TV show at Warner Brothers, which has to do with cooking.
Oh, I know what that is, but I guess we won't say anything for now.
It is announced, but I don't like the
Oh,
connection.
is it announced?
But I don't
Uh,
like it too, so somebody can Google it.
it's better to err, you know, to be overly cautious, I think, you know. Okay. Well, um, that's cool. I know something about that, so yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And how about you, Brandon?
I am enjoying vacation.
Much needed.
After yeah, much needed. I had an amazing 20-year run of
Mhm.
continuous work and amazing projects at Warner
Mhm.
Brothers. And after Watchmen, I needed a break.
Yeah. Well, what a
And
culmination. What a way to kind of cap it off, you
that
know?
was a big one. That was a big
Yeah.
one. And so yeah, I'm taking a little time away right now.
Hmm. All right. Well, much deserved. I think people will definitely be looking forward to seeing what you do next, and I'm sure it will be interesting. Um,
So
so yeah. With that being said, it's been great, guys. Thanks for giving me your time, and
thank you.
till next time, everybody. Be seeing you.
All right.